welcome to the show, guys. We have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Kate Deering. She is, in my opinion, reached a pinnacle of knowledge that she can actually convey in a very easy way. She wrote an incredible book that is becoming very well known because I'm telling everyone about it and other people. And the book itself is called, I don't know if you guys can see this, How to Heal Your Metabolism, Stop Blaming Aging for your metabolism, your slow metabolism. And the reason why this book has been a lifesaver for me and other people that I've told is that it is an easier way for people to understand many theories that have been kind of blown out of proportion, and we kind of all stumbled on this in different ways. Kate's background is in 20 years of experience. She's been in the health and fitness business, where she has studied with wonderful people like Paul Chek. She's an Olympic lifting coach, a Z-Health practitioner with Dr. Cobb. She is also a certified nutritional consultant. She is an athlete herself, been very much a competitor with tennis, done marathons, Grand Canyon, Mount Whitney, and some other things that she's also been doing. And when she became a part of this knowledge that we're talking about, which comes from a lot of different people, Ray Peat, Rhoda Barnes, Constance Martin, Hyan Saleh, and a few others, it became a wonderful tool for understanding why so many dogmas have been coming through in the health and fitness industry. And I'll let her tell you more, but what we'd like to also tell you is that you can reach her at katedeering.com. Her email is kate@katedeering.com, and her business is Kate Deering Fitness. And so we'd like to welcome Kate. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you,
ladies. How are you today?
Doing well. Living the life every day.
Awesome. In more ways than one, I would assume.
Exactly.
So Kate, do you want to start by just kind of sharing with everybody your journey, how you came to this point, how you came to write the book and all that?
Sure. To the gist of it, I was starting to have my own health issues in my late 30s, which would mean I was starting to gain weight. I was starting to have hormonal issues. You know, you start to get to that premature aging. And, you know, I've been in the health and fitness industry all my life and kept thinking I'm doing everything right. Is this just what happens when you turn 40?
Right.
You know, and everyone had told me, and I'm like, oh, that's not going to be me. And all of a sudden it was now me. So I started to think there had to be a better way if I'm doing everything I think is right and I'm having these issues. And so via Josh Rubin is how I stumbled on the work of Ray Peat. I started to read about an entirely different concept. But basically everything I was doing was almost the opposite. And that's kind of how Ray teaches it. And that's why it seems so strange and hard to understand to so many people, is because it's such a different way of thinking.
Right.
But luckily it started to make sense to me because it was all based on human physiology, how our bodies work. And when you understand physiology, you understand why most diets and exercise protocols that a lot of people are doing to per se get healthy or lose weight are actually detrimental to long-term health and detrimental to their metabolism. And so for me, I started to understand why having a high metabolism and why it's so important, and that everything I thought was good for me was actually causing me to lower my metabolism. So I had to kind of take that different approach. It was a journey because at the time there wasn't a lot of other research out there. And so there were a lot of self-experimentations and a lot of ups and downs. But from that, I started to understand why and how to heal essentially. And realizing that Ray's work is so complex that for me to understand it better too, and for me to teach it to my clients, I decided that it needs to be an easier and better understood method. And that's kind of where the book came from.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's a great book, and I have both shared similar experiences. I stumbled upon Josh and Jeannie's work as well, and worked with them for a little while. But I ran into the same issues. Like I really, at first when I first started reading Ray Peat's stuff, it's like it was mind boggling. It was like learning a new language almost.
Exactly.
So yeah, so we appreciate you. We appreciate the book. We refer people to it all the time
And I appreciate
because it's
that.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really would have loved to have had that book when I first stumbled on it. So I am so grateful for the people that get to read it first before they even really delve into all the science of Ray Peat and all the other stuff. Josh and Jeannie did a great job sending all that information through the metabolic blueprint, which they are now talking more about the thyroid and stuff. Except the problems were with the information that I kind of stumbled on myself through everyone kind of bringing the information in was it was an overload, especially when you are fatigued
Yep.
mentally,
Yeah.
physically. And so this is like spoon feeding someone just a little something so that they don't try to do everything at once, which was one of my issues when I started getting into it. I
Yep.
totally went full flood into it. And then what we can maybe talk about now is what happens when people gain the weight, that they don't pay attention to how their food frequencies, how their ratios are important, the temperature and pulse, and how to be very slow into integrating this information. So maybe if you could tell us your experience of what you've been doing with your clients and how that has helped them.
Right. So my experience was the same as yours, with not a lot of guidelines. I was full force, jumped in, and had all sorts of wackadoodle issues, which is
Right.
hormonal and the weight gain and so forth. Luckily, it wasn't too extreme, but I had them all. And so what we realized, or what I realized, is yes, you have to go slow with this protocol. And it's very different from other diet approaches out there because every other diet approach will have you change everything tomorrow and go this
Right.
way. And with this and in a healing protocol, it's much different. If you try to do that, you're going to have some negative things happen. And that's why some people say this doesn't work. And I'm like, it does work. You just went too fast. And so it's kind of looking at what somebody's eating now and then making appropriate changes, whether it's, consuming the same amount of calories, but start changing some of the foods that they're consuming. So you pick and choose some things that you can use for them that will allow them to go to much slower level or slower speed so that the weight gain doesn't come on. Sometimes it still will. I mean, it's something I haven't, especially if you're a very lean woman. And I was fairly lean. I mean, I was gaining some weight, but I was still not, 30 pounds overweight or 40 or whatever, so it's something like, when you are super lean, you might still gain a little bit of weight, but going a lot slower can keep that at least down for 5 pounds or something. And then that way, you're not going to be hindered from having that happen to you.
Yeah, and that is what I'm trying to bring to light too, because I'm really not even sure. I kind of feel like it's not natural or healthy for women to be too lean, you know? But we have this picture of health for a woman to have like rock hard abs now. And that looks, it's supposed to be like the pinnacle of health, but and that's the problem. I think people have this fear of gaining any weight at all. Like you're doing something wrong, or we have, like, in my experience, a lack of understanding of how the metabolism really works. So,
Totally agree. And also for women, I mean, for them to get that look, and if you look at any fitness magazine or anyone, I mean, I've worked with many women that used to be fitness competitors and had that look, but usually to get there, it took some extreme measures and some really stressful workouts and some really stressful diets.
yeah.
So it can be obtained. It usually went down a path, though, that was incredibly challenging and not good for their metabolism. And I'm not saying you can't get lean eating this way. I mean, I'm fairly lean now. I'm smaller now in my life than I have been most of my life. So it can be obtained. It takes a lot longer and it
Okay.
takes
Yeah.
patience. Yeah. And it just takes an understanding of, a high metabolism equals less stress and eating enough nutrition, enough food to support yourself, which you really have to unwind a lot of the learning and belief systems that you've been carrying on, which most people have been carrying on for most of their life, which, if we understand the brain, we know that that takes time. And you're just not going to be able to substitute one belief for another. you still have to unlearn all of those bad habits and bad things you did so that you can start creating this new pattern. But that takes a lot of repetition and a lot of continual of doing it, per se.
Which also leads into why the aging aspect comes into the play, where people start to do things on a short term, getting that weight loss, getting their fit body, but don't realize how in the long term they're increasing their aging. They're causing metabolic changes that you may stop their hormones from working as well, keeping them in a space of more fatigue through that the longer lifespan of their lives. They just, as we kind of figured out with our own, I'll say to myself, I figured out the clarity became even more apparent as I was eating more for my, keeping my blood sugar levels higher and making sure that everything that I had energy for in my temperature and pulse kept me knowing that my heat in my body was actually a sign of health, not cold hands, cold fingers, and so there's a misconception, I think, where we all kind of walked into is that, well, it's just the AC's running, or this is the part of our life that we're in, the downtime, and this is life starting to get harder, because you're getting older. And so that's what I like about how your book is saying, no, you can't go into that mindset. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
That is correct. And because the mindset and everything you're teaching, I mean, when the world around you has a belief and is carrying it, you tend to follow it, so to actually create a different path, does take a lot of people that are trusting, but also a deeper understanding and looking at things and going, this really isn't working. And it's really is taking a lot of my energy and and I'm in a real resistance to, having to have all this willpower and all these words that we usually associate with being healthy, willpower and commitment. And I mean, not to say there isn't, but willpower to me, if your diet takes willpower to eat that way, then I'm not sure it's the right diet, right? And so if you take on the belief that it should be supportive and you should feel good and that you shouldn't be hungry and starving all the time and that your mood should be stable and you shouldn't be craving stuff all over the place, those shouldn't be happening. I mean, you should be able to feel good and happy and fulfilled and not hungry all the time, but also eat foods that you like. And this is what I love about this approach. It's like, as soon as you have that, it becomes so much easier, and then your life opens up to so many more things.
That's what I loved about it when I first started. I was like, whoa, I could have all these decadent foods and still... I remember years ago, I was like, this is amazing. And I just, of course, went full force into that too. But yeah, it was, I think just my body needed it so bad. And I had just been eliminating that for so long, and it was needing those nutrients. And I think, like you're saying, like some of those diets really work in the very beginning for people, or so they get results or whatever they're wanting. But then I think long term, like especially when you get to the age of 40, you can't push through. It just isn't going to happen. Maybe men can do that better than women because of the hormonal difference. But I think for most women, and most women I've talked to and what I've personally experienced, you just hit a brick wall with your hormones. So if you're not supporting them before that, then you're gonna run into some major issues. So yeah, but I think the food that the nourishing foods, those are the ones that are gonna be supportive for hormones and anti-aging, protective hormones. Those things are gonna be what like what you mentioned in your book. That's what we want to focus on after the age of 40, especially. But I think it's hard for people to understand when they're not 40, right? It's like, well, wait a minute, this is working for me. I look great, So,
and that's okay.
Yeah,
I think everyone takes the path that works for them when it works. I mean, if you knew everything when you came out of the womb, what would life be about, right? So It's like you have to learn your journey the way you're going to learn it. And some people learn at 30, some people learn at 60. But, you're never too old to learn this philosophy and have it work for you. It just, you might have a little longer journey, but, you'll be better off, I assure you, in 1 or 2 years going a path that's going to help you increase metabolism versus one that's going to trash you more. And then in 6 months, you're going to start putting all that weight back on. And in 2 years, you're going to be far worse than you ever were 2 years ago. So, progress is progress, even if it's slow.
Right, and which then comes into the factors of people having more pain, where they talk
Yeah.
about arthritis, things that are, symptomatic, oh, my joints hurt, I'm starting to feel that aging process, where they may not understand the physiology is that inflammatory response is happening so more because of how often they've been lived on stress hormones, where they didn't pay attention to knowing that, the system was adapting to your way of doing based on the fact that you thought, yeah, that it's working. Yeah, I don't see anything right now. There's nothing really happening to me. But when you start to notice, those more and more things start to slide down and try to, eyesight or the fatigue or certain things that are starting to come into that play, really focus more on how we change everything with ourselves and how we want to be able to keep ourselves from going down a harder road than we want it to be. Like, it seems
Yeah.
very hard now if you think about all the stuff we've done.
I know.
Like, oh my
I
God.
think about that. I'm like, that took a lot of energy.
Well, I look at all my workouts I did, but I look at how I used to eat, and it was a constant place of suffering.
Yes.
What am I going to have next? And it was, and I can talk to clients now, and they experience the same thing, especially women. It's constantly on their mind.
Yeah.
When they travel, they have to work out and they have to eat a certain. Oh my God, it really takes the fun out of life,
Yes.
and you don't realize how much space it takes up in your mind. Especially I've been in the fitness industry, there's an immense amount of stress that you should look a certain way. And if you're not, then you're not healthy. And it's, these beliefs that we've created that just aren't working and keep us in this state that, oh my God, I have to stay this certain way. And it becomes this obsession, and none of that is healthy. And, and when you finally get over that hump and you can shift, not only your body, but your mind, life just becomes a lot easier, and then your body just kind of flows with it without all that resistance and stress.
I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of these myths. So let's jump in the first one, the one
Yay.
about why sugar is supposedly
I really
the
want to
bad
talk about
thing
this.
now.
Right.
And how people
Yeah.
confuse themselves into believing that, I need to keep myself from my indulgences, right? These whole ideas of sugar's bad for us. Sugar is like a cocaine. Sugar can cravings, all that stuff, and how even fructose, because of the adding fruit in your diet, people have been pulling away from that too. What do you say to people with this mentality that sugar is bad? What do you kind of help them with?
Right. Well, I honor it because I had the same thought process, and and in excess or in the right macronutrient or the wrong macronutrient ratio, so forth. I mean, sugar can have all those effects but there's a misunderstanding, and as they say, the poison's in the dose. So excess amounts of sugar without the right combinations of fats and proteins, or in the wrong delivery systems, like in processed cakes and cookies and all that. Yeah, I mean, it's going to have a negative effect on you. But it's understanding that the sugar in itself is your cell's best and preferred source of energy. Your brain loves sugar. It uses 50% of your usable sugar that you consume, and your cells prefer it. And so when you can understand that and start winding things back, and it's like, okay, well, what else, if your cells prefer sugar, when you consume a lot of energy, with that, you also need a lot of nutrition. So you're always going to want to consume the sugars with a lot of nutrition. So what does that look like? That looks like fruits and juice and milk and anything that comes with it with a lot of nutrition. And even with that, because we all know, sugar can rise, going into the blood, it will increase insulin levels, and then you can drop your blood sugar, and so you can get on that roller coaster. So then you have to say, well, it's not best to consume by itself. It should be combined with other foods that are going to slow the absorbency down. So that's consuming it with some protein or some fat. So you can get a meal that has a good amount of energy in it, but is going into your system, a little bit slower, so as the point where your body can utilize it. And then it's not, into overconsumption, because if you overconsume it, you consume too much or in the wrong ratios. Whatever your body is not utilizing, if your body is full of glycogen, all your stores are full, then it is going to store as fat, and then you can get some negative effects from it. But it's not the sugar per se. It is usually the amount or the delivery system. or it's
Yeah.
your own body's inability to utilize it properly because you've put yourself under so much stress, or you've turned yourself into more of a fat burner. And when you do that, you can't utilize sugar optimally. So,
Can you talk a little bit about that part? Because I don't think a lot of people understand what that means.
Yeah, she asked.
I think you're talking about fat metabolism.
Yeah, so we want to talk a little bit about why people think, burning fat and stuff is so important, and start doing the fat, why people are afraid of it, and then some people feel like that's the best way to go. So maybe talk about a little of that also.
Yeah, and maybe why the whole sugar thing is like so bad right now. Like why are people, if we have this knowledge physiologically, right? It's pretty much a fact, I think. Why are we promoting no sugar in the diet? Like why are people doing that? That's my question.
Well, again, I think the promotion of, no sugar is because all the research that's done, it says that sugar is bad, is in excess. Excess everything. So yeah, if you give anyone excess, and anything, you give them excess sugar without balancing blood sugar, without the right other macronutrients, or in the wrong delivery system, you're gonna get diabetes. You're gonna incur and increase the stress to metabolism, because again, having high blood sugar and having increased fat is not good for you. And whatever your body cannot utilize, sugar per se, is going to get stored. Even though it is highly metabolic, even though it can, increases your body temperature and, carbon dioxide more than any of the other nutrients, fat and protein, it's still in excess can be bad. Or if your body is in that stressed place and you're not utilizing it properly, So you have to take a lot more into consideration than just sugar itself. We all want to point the finger at sugar, but it's not sugar's fault. It's a misunderstanding of how to use it, and using it in excess, and understanding the human body, and when it is in a stressed place, that it might not utilize it properly, right? Which comes to the next question of being a fat metabolizer, because that's what a diabetic is. That's what usually when you get older, you turn into. You are able to utilize and process fats, or use them in energy better than a sugar metabolism. And what happened? Yeah. So PJ Randall basically come up with that theory, as, they basically sugar and or glucose and fat fight to get into the cells, essentially. And so if you're utilizing fat as your primary energy, it's going to block sugar metabolism. And that's what's going to maintain and keep sugar, continue it into the blood. And then if it's not used, it's just stored. So it's kind of this feedback loop that, when you're utilizing fat, you can't metabolize sugar. Sugar stays in the blood, then sugar turns into fat. And it just creates this cycle, right? And so what you have to do is not eliminate the sugar, which is what everyone keeps doing. You need to teach the cell how to start utilizing sugars better. Because, at different times of your day, or different times, you are utilizing all components, fat, sugars, and proteins. Your body prefers to use fat in a resting state, and so while sleeping or doing low activity, fat usually becomes the primary energy source, especially for muscles, especially for your heart. So they're a big consumer. But in a active state, when you're thinking or you're exercising, sugar should be your primary source of energy, or anything under intensity, it should be your primary source of energy. So it doesn't mean you can't become a fat metabolizer. We all are at certain times, but it's just you don't want to be one all the time, because that is going to incur a stressed place. And, and then, yes, your body will not utilize sugars properly. And that's where all the damage and bad things can happen. But again, that's an adaptive state. Your body is always going to adapt to whatever stressors you put upon it. If you don't give it sugar, it's going to adapt to that. And it can, you can show you what we think is beneficial. You might utilize body fat initially, but long term, it's going to create other issues, which is going to link to illness, disease, and so forth, because a low sugar diet is going to eventually become a stress diet, and you'll have a stressed body. And that's where illness and disease all show up.
Which is where we come in with the knowing that people already put themselves in so much stress with like high cardio or long endurance races. It's okay for them to believe you're taking glucose when they're in their race. But they don't realize a lot of times as the metabolic rate has been slowing down, as they get more endurance in terms of performance, they get their heart rate, their heart rate and everything drops, everything starts to, slow down for their performance. Then they don't realize how much stress they're in terms of like what the body is either utilizing, sugar, fats, or protein. And so then there's kind of a mix up about how people want to use these as like, okay, I'm going to be a carb burner, or I'm going to be a fat burner, but then that whole translation doesn't come into where we're going for the long term. Like because I came from a very, like you, endurance background. I did lots of Ironmans. I did a lot of things where I would eat sugar only in the race, but outside of my life, I was like conditioned into believing, don't eat the sugar, it's bad for you, don't have a Coke, don't have anything that is going to be sugar oriented. So my question is really, what do you tell those people who still want to do their big races, still want to be in that kind of lifestyle, and they don't get how that system changes through the day?
Yeah, well, and being, I have done endurance events. All of them are anti-metabolic. When you're training for an endurance event, your metabolism is going to change. Mine does every single time. And I don't do it year round. I usually do one a year. But during training, I've become more efficient because that's what long duration cardio is going to do. It's going to create efficiency. That's why your heart rate slows down, your body temperature and pulse are going to slow down. Everything is going to slow down, because if it doesn't, you're going to have to consume a massive amount of calories while you're doing your exercise. And that usually doesn't equal high performance. So your body does it basically so it can survive because of all the additional stressors you're putting upon it. So if you opt and you choose to live that lifestyle, you need to rest and recover. That's huge. You need to eat supportively, meaning eat, good meals with tons of carbohydrates prior, and yeah, if you're doing that long duration cardio, I mean, you do the best you can by eating during it, but you're going to utilize a good amount of fat tissue, the longer you go, that your body does it as a survival technique. But when it does do that, understand it's putting your body in a state of efficiency. So when you're done or finished competing in your event, give yourself enough time to rest and recover to get your body back into a healthy metabolic rate again. It's just the repeated bouts, and people never take today. They're just, I hear about these women, they're just doing half Ironman, one a month. And I'm like, that's too much, and they're just keeping their bodies in that state. But yet, you have to be efficient to perform in those kind of programs. And that's when you can usually do better. But, again, it depends on what your goal is. If you want to have a high metabolism all the time, don't do long duration cardio.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, actually.
Yeah, there is a consequence, right?
There is a consequence, yeah. Just understand what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Be responsible about it.
That's right. But if you love it, you should do it, right? Yeah. Whatever you do. If that makes you happy, just then don't
without hurting yourself. Yeah, too bad.
Yeah, do the best you can to support yourself on every level, and and just understand that you're going to create efficiency.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story. I had a friend who I did marathons with, and he went on a carb diet, and the first reactions now I see, or if I think about this, is he had all the cramping in his calves and stuff, and then thinking about like all the ideas of doing like keto diets, or doing any kind of removing one of the macronutrients out because you want to lose weight, has always seemed to come back and haunt people in the end, because you need all three. However you're doing it and however you're scheduling it, your meals and stuff is very much a science of what works for you.
Correct. Yeah. And there are times that are open windows that you should be consuming stuff, whether it's during, but certainly post-workout. Yeah, you need to have a good amount of carbohydrates and protein. And pre-workout, I still talk to people that like to work out on an empty stomach, and I'm like, you do understand that you've just stressed your body, and 8 or 9 hours from sleeping, you're depleted, and now you're going to work out with no fuel. They're like, great, I'll use fat. I'm like, okay, just understand you're putting your body in a state of stress under activity and
Right.
utilizing fat as energy is not the best, and I mean, it just, it bounces off people and because they're all stuck on, I just want to use fat. I just want to burn fat. I'm like, yeah,
Right.
but we're not going to get you. Wouldn't you rather burn fat with the opportune times? If you have a high metabolism, then when you're sleeping, you're going to be burning more fat, right? When you're not doing
Right.
anything versus trying to just burn it off with all this activity. And then you're in all this resistance to try to do it. And it works until it doesn't work. And then it starts working against you.
And
Yes.
there's the surgeries. Everyone goes to surgery.
Or the
Right,
hormone treatment, right? The estrogen.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother topic.
Stop it, right?
Yeah, I did want, since we're kind of speaking about sugar, I wanted to talk a little bit about milk. And in your book, I was reading, you did a really great job of explaining the difference between all the varieties and options we have for milk, like the difference between low fat or regular fat, pasteurized, homogenized, I can't even say it, homogenized, there you go, and raw versus, pasteurized and those kind of things. I thought that was really great. But I think that I would just like to talk about that for a second because I'm still hearing like on a lot of health forums about milk causing acne and weight gain and all these things or food sensitivity type reactions. What is your opinion on that? Like, what do you tell people when if they ask you about that, any of those various issues?
I mean, milk is still, there's not this like clear path is what I've decided. I mean, everyone is different. And some people don't work well with milk. And it could be because, if you haven't had milk in your diet for a while, and you add it in and you add a bunch in, it's not going to work well. You don't have the enzymes to break it down. Your body has basically adapted to not having it, so it doesn't produce it anymore. So, but some people don't do well on cow's dairy, regardless of how we introduce it, they just don't. But then they do great on goat's milk or buffalo, which seems to be a little less processed, so it depends. I usually experiment with different things with different people. But what you should understand is milk is a perfectly filtered food. It's already filtered out for you. And it is one of the best delivery sources for something like calcium, which we need in pretty high amounts. And so if you can use it or we can get your body to be able to use it, then it's a wonderful food for you. And, like I said, if you don't think you do well on milk, doesn't mean you can't do well on milk. It just means maybe right now you need to start with something that has, is low on lactose, so it could be just adding in cheese and seeing how that works for you. Or maybe it's just adding in 2 ounces of milk a day for a week and seeing how that works for you and allowing your body to start adapting again to being able to use milk. Because I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who say I can't do dairy. I'm like, okay,
Right.
let's try this, just a little. This is all we're going to do for a week and see how you do. Okay, I did good. All right, let's add a little bit more. And it's going through that slow process again, slow steps, small steps, and allowing them to adapt back to utilizing dairy properly. So, usually these forums, it's all these people that didn't try milk or didn't use milk, and then they used it and they have too much and they have all these negative things happen. And yeah, it's very true. It can happen. So, go slow with it. And sometimes it's trying different ones. If cow's milk doesn't work, try goat's milk, try buffalo's milk. If none of them work, which can also happen, then we just kind of go a different route.
Yeah, I agree. I think, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So in your book, I mean, to even just explain half of what we're saying is totally in your book in an easy way. It is also part of the physiology of how important calcium is to phosphorus ratios. And so there's that part that you write in there too about how, why the calcium is so important and why the delivery of milk is such a perfect form of it. And when you talked about it in the book, I realized like a lot of people don't get a great explanation of why this is and why that there is necessary. So, and most of everything we're going to talk about today is how you've taken it down and explained it in a way that's very simplified, and then put it in a way where there is some research that really says, hey, what you may have been told isn't necessarily the truth. And
Right.
so why, the protein is important, why the sugar in the milk is important, why, that calcium is important versus, like I said, the phosphorus. What else do you find people are resistant the most about milk, in your opinion?
Well, it's probably the lactose. I mean, they might have a lactose issue that usually is just, to me, it's caused by that they haven't consumed milk somewhere along the lines. They stopped consuming it because they were told it was bad. I didn't consume milk for 2 years, at least 2 years, because I was told it was evil, like so was sugar and all of those things. And so, understanding that, again, your body does need a good amount of calcium, and for your calcium to be absorbed, it does need vitamin D, but it also needs sugar. And so because milk has sugar in it, it does help the absorbency of the calcium. And, calcium is linked, or calcium diets are linked to low body fat or lower BMI, also decreased inflammation. So they do a lot of, and they're linked to women having less PMS. There's a lot of good research that shows just by increasing calcium intake that you can have a lot of lower blood pressure. And so it's such an important component that a lot of people don't think of. And they're like, well, I'm getting it from my vegetables. I'm like, well, yeah, but your vegetables also have oxalates in it and all these inhibiting factors that aren't allowing you to absorb calcium properly. So you have to take all of it into consideration, and you have to break everything down. And if anything I've learned by utilizing Dr. Ray Peat is not everything is what it seems. And so you can read a research article and it can come up with milk is bad, but then when you break and look at what they did and how they did it, you realize, well, of course they came up with that information. So you really have to look at the research and how it's implemented and done to understand why they got to the conclusions that they did.
And did you get a lot of your stuff from PubMed that helped you write this book to kind of verify some of what, kind of those main key issues? Is that what you were using to help you?
I did a lot of PubMed. I would take Dr. Pete's articles and then I would look at what he had, all the research that he used. And so then I would go back and look at that. Because, I had to read his articles like 10 times like everybody else. And then I just started asking him questions,
I was going to ask if you've talked to him about, before you wrote the book.
I never physically, but I've had about 300 or plus email exchanges with him. And there was days I would send him like 3-4 emails, and he would answer every one of them. And I'm like, who is this person? Who does this? But he did. I was like, I don't understand this. And then he would be like, link me to something. And sometimes he doesn't answer you directly, but he sends you like 5 different research articles that you're trying to decipher what they mean. But when you break them all down, you're like, okay. And then is this what you're trying to say? I'd email him back. I'm like, so is this it? And he's like, okay, yep. And so then that's where it would come to. But it was like, it was so mind blowing for me in the beginning, because I do, since you're in the industry, I had, 20 years in this industry, my belief system was really rooted and down. Even though it wasn't working, it was really deeply rooted. And he just threw everything out. And I still wanted to root down into my beliefs. It took me time to really shift, even though, okay, this makes physiological sense, but because the results weren't immediate, because that's what usually happens, I question a lot of it, but I keep going back, and, slowly but surely the old belief system unraveled, and the new system has now to play. And now that's, everything else I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense. And it becomes much easier, but it takes some time.
Yeah. Which is good, because a lot of people, when I've talked to some people, they're so resistant to even like knowing that their belief system is wrong, because there's so many other things that have been told over the years, like how we've all told that sugar was bad, there's caffeine's bad, that we shouldn't eat meat, we should eat meat, these concepts keep flowing in and out, but there isn't really a definitive like physiological course that anyone takes and goes, how does this work for your body, is shown in a depth way, because it's such a broad way of looking at stuff. I don't know how anybody who remembers the Krebs cycle in their classes of biology. Yeah. even the experts forget, the doctors and all these great professionals and experts, and we're and they're debating all this stuff, the documentaries that come out, the people that are spouting off reasons for why these things are, all so important to know, but yet there is something that they're missing too. So it's like when I come back to just reading Ray's stuff, I'm still going, wow, that makes more sense. I didn't understand.
Right.
And you said that in your book too, that it took a lot for you to sit there and you just said today, but I mean it's quite a big jump for people to really let go of those beliefs.
Well, it's all about
Right.
context too. It's like what what context is that in? And like a lot of the research that comes out that's trendy seems to be that information isn't given. So I think
And it's
that's
taken
part.
out of context.
Yeah,
a lot
totally,
of it, right?
totally.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can find 10 people that all do crappy when they eat meat, and so meat's bad, right? But let's understand the physiology of the person I'm putting it in, and if you understand their background, you might understand why it's not working for them. Because meat doesn't work for everybody, and it can have some inflammatory issues. And in a stressed body, it isn't ideal. So if I'm doing a bunch of research on sick people and I give them a bunch of meat, it's not going to do well. Or a bunch of sick people that don't do well with dairy, and I do a bunch of research on them, it's not going to show up the dairy's good. And, who do we do research on normally? A bunch of sick people. So, so we're teaching people how to be sick, essentially. Like, all right, well, this stuff doesn't work for sick people, so nobody should do it. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Let's find out healthy people and what it takes for them to thrive, and do a lot of research on that. But, most of it's not done that way. So that's why every person you have to look at them independently. And when you understand physiology and use that as just your base, then you can start making the improvements. But that takes, it's not just here is X, Y, and Z and do that. It just isn't that way. And that's where a lot of people, I think, get stuck with this approach, because they're like, well, I have to think, and I have to adapt, and I have to shift, and I have to kind of pay attention. I'm like, yeah.
You have to participate. It's your life. You have to step up and participate.
Can you just write me a diet? I'm like, no.
No.
And we talk about like meat and why in certain people. So the inflammatory part of it is an issue for people. So, how people who have arthritis or cancer or something like that may not do well on meat, and then why meat shouldn't be the main focus in a diet. Is another thing that you talk about in your book, about why these things become an inhibitory to a lot of your main process of your body. So the thyroid has to have some protein, but you also have to have a way to process that. So if you have a low metabolism, all these things that kind of have to be happening while you're eating this meat is an important part also. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why people are symptomically having what I might call is thyroid symptoms. They may not have thyroid problems, but they're having these symptoms that are showing up to kind of bring them into this space of either supplementation, or they think that they have some major issue going on, maybe a disease, something like that. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
So are you saying, like, talk about people that are having hypothyroid symptoms, what is going on with them? Or,
Yes.
I mean, is it really hypothyroid? I mean, I think they are. I mean, anyone that's in a low metabolic state is going to have some hypothyroid symptoms, and with that comes a colder body, slower pulse, lower temperatures, cold hands, cold feet. You could, decrease digestion, decrease hormone function. I mean, anything that is happening in a sick state is usually in a low metabolic state as well. So the theory is, and I never say I can heal, or I'm not a doctor, I can't do any of these things. All I can do is help you support your metabolism and see if symptoms go away. And you don't try to isolate anything, and that's because the medical world has become so specific with their doctors and specialists, and I'm not sure that that's a great idea. Because, when you kind of overall fix the foundation, which is help somebody's metabolism work better, symptoms just go away. You don't have to isolate them and just try to fix that single symptom, because usually it doesn't work, because that's where they just become into a prescription of drugs and they do something to remove the symptom and it's not fixing the problem. So, I mean, anyone that's experiencing it, and I haven't, everyone I know is experiencing some sort of low metabolic state at some point in their life. if they become sick. And so because of everything that we've been taught, and the healthy people aren't getting any better because they're doing all the health so-called approaches, which don't support a high metabolism.
Sure. Well, one of the questions I had was why people, when they first started Repeat, they got into the idea it was a diet, right? Everyone started to drink more, like gallons of orange juice, gallons of milk, and they started taking thyroid, and then they weren't experiencing the shift because they were on a liquid diet mainly. And so then there's a lot of people who came back from Ray's work saying that doesn't work, and some people have now said, okay, these foods are called histamine foods now. It's like a trigger word, and that they're creating a problem for them, and that this isn't the way to go. And I don't know if you experienced having to work with the people that tried the work and then didn't understand. I mean, there's some that just went fast, but there are some people that literally took it and altered it into a diet or a mainframe of belief.
I'd like to add like bloating to that.
Yeah.
How can people avoid that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you listen to Ray and he talks about, they listen to what he ate, right? He's like, okay, I have a gallon of milk a day and 2 quarts of orange juice. I mean, and that's like that, and that is Ray Peat's diet, right? Yeah. And the guy utilizes energy really well right now, even at 78 years old. I mean, and so they're like, oh, that's what I should do, and I'm like, if you haven't consumed milk and you haven't consumed sugars, and I mean, you haven't done any of those things, no, that's gonna be like the worst thing you can possibly do for yourself. You're trying to go from A to Z. It's like saying, I've never run a marathon. I think tomorrow I'll run one and not go a mile tomorrow, right? And so you have to take that into consideration. Again, you have to remember your body will always adapt to whatever stressors you put upon it. And so if you put this weird, stressful, greens, lots of greens and boiled chicken and no carbohydrates and no salt and no dairy, and that's how you eat, that's what your body's adapting to. So yes, if you start adding things like salt and sugar, you're going to not do so well. It's not going to work for you at a fast pace, and you're going to have a lot of negative things happen to you. So you just can't make that kind of shift on this type of diet, especially if you've come from one that's so the opposite, which would be like a low carb approach or a ketogenic diet or something that is completely removed these macronutrients from your diet and then try to just add them all back in, and that's what people have done. And those are the people you read, like, well, I tried and I did this and I gained weight and all my, my labs look horrible. And I'm like, well, yeah, you didn't take what you were doing into consideration, and you just started doing all these things and your body just went haywire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And most of them complained about they're still having the cold hands, cold feet. A lot of them had more gut issues than they even started. So there was the bloating that Allison was talking about. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that seems to have been a big conversation, especially in women, and the bloating and the estrogen dominance and stuff.
Well, if they switched and they started to have more bloating, then, I mean, I would be like, okay, it could be the dairy. I mean, it could just be an independent thing that they're consuming, because this eating way and the food it recommends, I mean, should really help decrease the bloating. I mean, so if you're having it, then it's probably a lactose issue, or there's something else in your diet that you're not processing properly. It could just be that maybe you need to eat smaller meals. Maybe you're not chewing your food very well. Something is happening. That way, or we might have to look at your gut. Maybe it's your gut's just not processing certain things. So, maybe we need to add more bone broth or gelatin or glycine or something that's going to help the gut health and go from there. But, it's always trying stuff and seeing how it works. And then, if it does, great. If it doesn't, then it's winding it back and let's try this. So, to me, what I've seen is that the women that come to me usually have a lot of bloating. And once we start shifting them and giving them a lot more foods that are easier to digest, which is Rhea's approach, and adding them in slowly, usually a lot of the gut health improves because, we're not giving them all those hard to digest foods anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Too fast, too soon, probably, for a lot more people, too.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were going to talk about, I thought, would be What what about like the mindset and the beliefs? Have you been working with women in terms of helping them, besides just the food part? What do you kind of transition into helping them with the other parts of that? Because that seems to be a little bit more of where you're going next in terms of maybe writing another book or wanting to do something. What do you kind of tell your clients and how that's helping you?
Um, yeah, well, I like to look at, I mean, I got to see kind of what their history is. So history is important to see how much, like me, how rooted they are in their belief systems, because again, we all do things and we understand this isn't working, but when we're really rooted, our minds will want to take us back there, even though we're like, no, it's not, but you're still going back to that old habit. So it's constantly reminding and talking about where they're at. When I work with women, it's important to me to kind of wherever they're at right now to have them be able to be present in that moment and to be able to be at peace with, try to be at least, and not in such resistance of who they are and where they're at in their life right now. Meaning, if you're in a place of I hate myself, and I'm not acceptable or loved if I'm 30 pounds overweight or whatever that looks like, then we're going to have a lot harder path than if you're like, okay, I'm okay with where I'm at right now. My priority is to just get into a healthy place. And so that path becomes a lot easier versus that path that is more resistance. So, I work on just trying to let them be and, and trying to accept where they are right now and that it's okay. And they're exactly where they need to be right now. And this is now a different place and to just be in a more of an awareness of where they are. So that their mind can create a little bit more ease, because when your mind's sitting there saying, I hate it, I just want to get thin, I'll be happy when I'm thin, that really makes the path challenging. And it creates that resistant patch, which creates stress. So if we can get that mindset in a little healthier place and they're thinking in a little healthier place and that they're in acceptance, the flow to heal or lose weight is a lot easier.
Yeah, they can sabotage the whole thing too if they're too stressed out about it. That the stress actually causes a lot of the symptoms too. A lot of times when I've found working with people.
Yep.
So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and women they're tough because they've equated their success with their weight.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with women that have a list load of symptoms, but they're lean. And as soon as I can improve all of we get better and better. And I'm like, I need you to stay off the scale for a good, amount of time, or 90 days or whatever that looks like, because it can deter them. And I've had some, they're so good. And then all of a sudden I can see they get on the scale and they gained 5 pounds and then they just freak out and they've created all this stress and they just unwind. And now all of this, I need to lose that 5 pounds again. I'm like, well, yeah, but wait a minute. We just had 10 improvements.
Right.
And they just got in their own way, right? Yeah. So you have to be careful, and you have to trust. This is a trusting path because it's not instantaneous. And you really, and when all of the world around you is telling you sugar is bad and this is bad and this is bad, and I'm telling you the exact opposite, you got to be careful who you're hanging out with. You got to be careful what you're paying attention to, and all of these things, because they can get in your way.
So how do you sell people on that? That's my question, Kate, because, it's like, how do you get them on board? I mean, I have been successful with people, but some people are just, they just don't have that long term. They get scared or they want to go back to their rooted beliefs around nutrition, and that's okay. But I'm just curious as to what your strategy is with that, how you help people kind of get more comfortable with it and sink into that. Because I know it is a process. It took me probably about 3 years really just to actually wrap my brain around it, because I kept doing what you were saying you did. Was I'd go back to these rooted beliefs that I had learned, because I'd been in the fitness industry for a long time too, and I was just like, wait a minute, that just totally is, backwards from what I've learned, and it, but yeah, so I'm just curious about that.
Well, first, I don't ever try to sell anybody anything. I think we're all on our paths, and when we're ready, we'll find the right teachers. And usually people find me. I mean, to me, all I can do is teach the truth, and I share what I learn. And if it's true for you, great. If it resonates with you, great. I have people contact me, and then I kind of get in a conversation with them, and maybe they're not quite ready, or I send them out some forms, because I have most people fill out, some extensive forms. And then I might not hear from them, or I might hear from them. So they're going to be ready when they're ready. But, while I'm working with them, if they opt to choose to work with me and they all come in, I'll tell you, the easiest thing about this is the food. I go, that's easy. I go, but you're going to come into some spots where you're going to come in resistance with yourself, your other people. And then, they can email me, and I just kind of talk them off the ledge a little bit, just to say that's normal. It's normal to have these feelings. It's normal to have this happen. Trust and stay the path. And it's basically, I have to ask them to trust me.
Yeah.
And it can be a scary path because you don't feel safe. You're walking into the unknown, right? We all know that even if we've been in a life of dysfunction, it feels safer than to jumping off the ledge and trusting. And I'm asking you to jump off the ledge, and I jumped off the ledge, and it was, a crazy time, but I trusted it finally. And when I did, I was like, wow, this is way better. Why would I?
Right.
For 20 years, I was doing all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it was so hard. And I always thought, God, why do I have to work so hard? And I work out so hard. And I'm eating like all this stuff. And I'm like, and so other Joe Blow doesn't do any of this. And, I'm like, because they're not doing any of this. That's exactly why they're having an easier time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really kind of interesting that you say that you try to help them work, or like the food's the easy part. Really, it's funny because I was listening to someone, a yogi, talk about how connected the mind and the emotions and the bodies are. So it's like a triangle. It kind of works with each other, but the body is the only thing that's in the real present moment. Like if we really focused on what that means to be in the moment, your body is telling you everything you need to know. Like if you're not feeling strong one day, there are certain reasons, and you can function to a point, but then you have to come back to that centerpiece of saying, okay, we can at least start here. And then, watch your mind go off into your emotions, or watch your mind go off into other stories that you've created. And, but if you come back to like, did you wake up and did you feel good? Did you sleep well? Did you have a good bowel movement? How was your day? Kind of brings everyone back into a more centered space. So it's interesting how you say it's fairly easy once you start to function off of what is utilizing that present moment.
Exactly. And I think, I think I said this to, or I wrote to you, and it was like, I think people have the hardest time healing or losing weight because they're not in that moment. They're in the past or in the future, and they're in the, I need to lose, or I used to, be this weight or whatever. And when you can keep them into the present space and allow their body to have that ease, and allow your body to have that place of safety and feel okay, that's when the healing really takes place. And, and when your body is in a healthy place, that's when it's going to allow the weight to come off. If you try to force it off, through excess exercise and diet, you can do it, but it isn't going to stay in or if it does, you're in a constant state of resistance all the time. That's the person that's obsessing and has to always be working out and dieting and focusing and, all of these things, which if you choose to live like that, that's fine. I mean, that's your choice. I chose, I didn't want to do that anymore. I mean, it was so, it sucks the life out of you. And so to have a better way and to understand there is a better way, creates a whole easier and better life for me and for others.
Yeah. One of the things I met when I worked with people is that how much energy is to take to think about all this stuff every moment of your day. What could you be doing with that energy, like that thoughts of where you repetitively think of something? What else are you distracting yourself from that actually would make you happier if you got a chance to even work on it, besides thinking about, if you fit in a pair of jeans anymore, or.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and it's stressful to do it, and it consumes a lot of your energy, and it's become a massive issue in our society and in our industry, and that sadly, the industry leaders, a lot of them are the ones that are teaching it. And I did it too. I mean, I didn't know any better. And so there's no judgment. It's just a saying that, for everyone to shift, you have to have a general interest. And when you know that, things aren't working for you, and that's what was happening for me, I'm like, it's hard for me to teach it to others, and I know I don't feel good.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
even though I still look good, I don't feel good. And so there needs to be a different path.
Yeah,
that makes
definitely.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kate. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank
And
you.
we'd love to have you on again at some point. But
Totally.
yeah, that was just amazing. So again, thanks for
Yeah.
coming on our show.
No
And
problem.
Kate, if you could share with everybody the best way to reach out to you, where they can find your book.
A good place is to get on my Facebook page. That's also Kate Deering Fitness on Facebook. I'm constantly posting on there daily. You can go to my website, katedeering.com, or you can contact me at kate@katedeering.com. But I'm usually pretty good at answering emails and questions, especially on my Facebook page. I like to keep the conversation going. I think that's a great place where people can learn from each other.
Awesome.
Yeah, your Facebook page is very awesome. I love what you've been posting a lot about your own changes and how you've kind of humbled yourself into realizing what you've learned. And this is a long time process, and we're all doing the best we can.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of helping each other out and making the community. So we invite you to our community where we started a Facebook page called Integrate Yourself podcasts, and we would love for you to post or do anything to, spread the word about your book, what you're doing next, where other people can learn more about you and stuff. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Bye.